Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 11 of It Takes Balls to Knit the show. Thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it was well worth your time. So in this episode, we're talking about my favorite thing in Knit You. I'm going to let you guess what that is. After that, we are going to Ghyll farm, and we're going to speak with Susan Crawford and see exactly what she does on the farm. She's invited us over for a stay, and it's fascinating. She does everything, but no spoilers. Then we're talking to Kate and Joe of Knit Now and Knit and Crochet Now magazines, and they're going to tell us exactly what goes into putting together a publication. And they should know they put out over 30 issues a year between them. Yes, it's fascinating stuff. And yes, we have some winners to announce from previous episodes. And if you don't know about that, well, then you probably aren't subscribed to our channel. So make sure you click on the subscription button below and ring the notification bell. That way you'll get a notification every time we put out a new episode, and you'll always be in the loop. Okay, I will see you on the inside. Welcome back, and again, thank you for joining me on this episode 11 of It Takes Balls to Knit the show. Now, as you may know, the first time I did this series, we only got to episode 10, and actually we did 10 episodes, we only aired 9, so this is a big milestone, and we're really glad that you're here with us for it. Now, in this episode in Knit You, I am going to talk about my favorite thing. Did you guess what that was? That's right, it's cables. Now, we're going to look at how we make cables and what they are and all that kind of stuff. But I want to reinforce the fact that this is not taking the place of proper knitting instruction from your local yarn shops or instructors at yarn shows or anything like that. As a matter of fact, we're actually teasing you a little bit because we're just going to whet your appetite with cables. I think if you realize just how easy they are to make, and then the endless possibilities of what you can do with them once you know how to make them, you're going to get addicted just like I am. Okay, so let's jump into our studio and talk with Mr. Hugzzz, where he's going to show you how to make cables. Hi everybody, I'm Mr. Hugzzz, and welcome to another edition of Knit You. Now, in this segment, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things. That's right, cables. I'm sure you know that I love to make cables. And today you're actually going to get a twofer because I'm going to show you how to make cables. They're actually not as complicated as you would think. But this is just a reminder, this is just the basics of making cables. There is a lot more you can do with them once you realize how they're made. And for that, I would recommend that you take a course. There are lots of them available at pretty much every single convention, knitting convention that there is out there. Your local yarn shops will have teachers, and I'm sure they'll do stuff on cables from time to time. Yeah, pretty much anywhere. So I'm going to show you the basics of making a cable. And as a two-for, like I said, you're going to get 2 for 1 today. I'm going to show you how to knit straight from the skein. Now, if you remember a couple segments ago, a couple episodes ago, we had Millie from Tribe Yarns in England show us how to turn a skein into a ball of yarn. And in that same episode, I showed you how to take that same skein and make it into a center pole ball of yarn. In that episode, I mentioned that you can actually knit straight from the skein. And to show you that I wasn't lying, we're going to do that. So we have here a skein of yarn, and all I'm going to do is this one, it only has the one tie, so I know for a fact that this is where all the good stuff is, all the ends are. And all I'm going to do is just untie it. And I'm going to do that carefully because I don't want to break my yarn and lose even a precious inch of this gorgeous, gorgeous yarn. And this, by the way, is Donegal tweed, and it is straight from Donegal. And it is just incredible. Now, there's a couple different variations of the Donegal, and we'll be looking at those in a future segment of Yarn Review. Okay, so there you go. I've got it untied. Now, this is as simple as it gets. The way that you knit straight from the skein is just ensure that you have a flat working surface like this, and that you're able to lay the skein of yarn flat. Okay, and all you do is, just as if you're going to wind it, I'm going to use this one because it looks like it's coming from the outside, and it's going to cause me less trouble. Maybe not. We'll see. Yeah, all you do is you take your yarn. I can see that this one will work a lot better if I flip it over, and you just take it around like so. It might be necessary from time to time to just hold it down as you pull it off. This yarn is quite sticky, but with other yarns it would be a little less sticky and it would come apart a lot easier. And as you can see, I have my yarn. Okay, so now for the actual cable knitting. Let's put our label aside. I am going to get my needles ready. And for these, I'm going to use about a 4.5 millimeter. It's not important as long as you have yarn or needles that are appropriate to the yarn that you're using. You'll be fine. Look at that, 4.5, right on. Bam, nailed it. And for those of you that are wondering, yes, these are Addy clicks, and we'll be looking at those in a future segment of Needle Exchange. That's where we review needles. So we'll be looking at not just the Addies, we'll be looking at, over time, hopefully, everyone that's out there. So yeah, we're planning to do the show for quite a while. Okay, so I am going to cast on a few stitches. Here's my yarn. I don't need many. So I'm not even going to bother using 2 ends like I normally would. I'm just going to go with, let's say, 10, 12. Actually, I'm doing cable, so let's do a 6-stitch cable. So we'll need 6 stitches for the cable. 2, 4, 5, 6. We'll want 2 relief stitches on either side, so that's another 4. And let's do 2 selvage stitches, so that's a total of 12. A lot of information right there, and we will cover all of that in this segment and future segments of the show. And like I said, if you'd like, just grab yourself a course at one of the conventions or from your local yarn shop. Okay, so I'm going to just do a quick setup, which entails my selvage stitch. I'm gonna knit 2, and I could have cast this on in the pattern I was going to use, but I decided not to, just because. So sorry. So I did my selvage stitch, and then I said 2 release stitches on either side of my cable. So that's going to be 2 purl stitches. And then my cable is going to be 6 stitches wide. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 2 more release stitches and a selvage stitch to end. Now, if you're not familiar with everything I'm telling you about, I'm not going to cover them in this one because this is about the cable. But again, there's lots of resources online at your local yarn shop and through instructors all over the place. Okay, so just a few things about cables. Cables lean either left or right, and with that, it simply determines where you put your cable needle when you take your stitches off. And some people think that you cable every row. No, you don't. You're cabling at a specific frequency. So this is a 6-stitch cable. So I have the option, obviously I could cable it every right side row, but that would be a very, very tight cable. Normally what I like to do is double the number of stitches that I have. So I would cable every 12 rows, or in actuality, my personal preference is when I have a number that's divisible by 4, I like to do it every 1.5 times the number of stitches. So if I had a 4-stitch cable, I would cable every 6 rows. If I had 8, I'd cable every 12, and so on and so on and so on. In general practice, I've just found that looks the nicest, regardless of the size of your yarn, for me personally. But when you're doing it, you would just do whatever the pattern says. Unless you're making up your own, then you can decide exactly when you want a cable. Okay, I think I have enough here in order to show you how to do a cable. Okay, so we've got this set up and we are ready to actually do a cable. And just so you can see what's happening here, I have 12 stitches on this needle. Now, the first stitch is my selvage stitch, and then I have 2 stitches that are a release stitch, and they are in reverse stocking stitch. I'll explain that in a second. I have 6 stitches that are stocking stitch. Those are going to be my actual cable, or the rope part of the cable. And then I have 2 more release stitches in reverse stocking stitch and a selvage stitch. So normally with cables, what happens, and I say normally because there are no steadfast rules with this. So you can do anything you like, but this is just a standard cable to show you the effect of that. So normally with cables, you've got your cables are done in stocking stitch because those stitches are actually raised from your work. And then on either side of that, to increase that effect of that raise, or to pop them as we call it, we have stitches that are done in reverse stocking stitch. So here I have 2 on either side, and then I just have selvage stitch on either end of that. Now, depending on how many release stitches you have, or what we call the background, your cables will pop. And or depending on how many cables you have. But sometimes you want the effect of having the cables just basically intertwined without any relief stitches at all. And that can produce a very pleasing effect as well. So cabling is actually just twisting or changing the order that you knit your stitches in. And what we end up doing is overlapping our stitches. So let's pretend I've got 6 stitches here. Knitting from right to left, I would normally knit, okay, so this is going to be backwards for me, so I'm going to say, I'm going to go this way. I would normally knit, say this is stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would normally knit these 3 stitches first, then these 3. So what I'm actually going to do is knit these 3 first and then these 3 so that I get this effect. Now I can have that effect where they cross to the right. That's how you're looking at it, okay? Or I can have this effect where they cross to the left. And that's simply dependent on what you do with your cable needle. Aha, cable needle. What is a cable needle? In order to knit these 3 stitches, or these 3 stitches after these 3 stitches, I have to temporarily suspend these 3 stitches. And I do that by putting them on a cable needle. And a cable needle is simply a double pointed needle. There's all kinds of them, all kinds of variations. Some of them are bent. Normally you get them in a set of 3, and there'll be a small, medium, and a large one. Some of them are straight like this and they have ridges in them so that the yarn doesn't slip off. All kinds. As long as they're double pointed so that you're not worried about which end you put your needles, the yarn in from, you're all set to go. So I'm actually going to just show you what I'm doing now. So now in order to make that cable, I'm going to work up to those stocking stitches that are my actual cable. And it doesn't matter whether you knit continental or traditional. Okay, so now I'm at those stitches. And as I said, to cable, I want to knit these 3 stitches here before these 3 stitches. So what I'm going to do is take those 3 stitches and put them on my cable needle. So I do that, I just slide them over. They're now on my cable needle. Now at this point I have an option, and normally you'll have the pattern and it'll tell you whether you want to put this cable needle to the front, keep it at the front, or put it to the back. Now if I keep it at the front, I'll show it to you this way. If I keep them at the front and knit these 3 and then knit those 3, I'll have a cable that crosses to the left. If I put it in the back and then knit those 3 and then knit the 3 off the cable needle, I'm going to have a cable that crosses to the right. Okay? So it doesn't matter which one you do, as long as you continue in that pattern for that panel or that column of stitches. Again, not a steadfast rule. Sometimes you want a serpentine effect of your stitches and you don't want them to actually crisscross all the time. So you would do that, say put it to the front in the beginning, then put it to the back. But normally for a standard cable, you're going to keep it in that, for that column of stitches, you're going to keep it whichever way you start out with. So ours is in the back right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to knit them through the back. I'm going to keep it at the back, and I knit the 3 stitches on my left needle. Okay, little tip here, at this point you want to give this last one a little bit of a tug so it's a little tight. And then I'm going to slide these stitches, this is why it's important to have a double pointed needle, to the front, or to the tip of the needle, and now I'm going to knit those 3. And again, that first one there, I want to give that a bit of a tug, and knit the next 2. And as you can see, my last 3 stitches fell off my needle. That doesn't always happen, but it did this time. So I'm just going to pick them back up. Normally I've got a lot more stitches on my needle and I'm not that concerned about it. Also, this cable needle is a lot bigger than the needle that I'm using, so that's why it allowed for that. And now I just finished my row, which is purl 2 and my selvage stitch Okay, and there I have completed a cable. As you can see, it's crossed. So through the magic of the internet, we've jumped forward in the future, and I have knit 5 more rows of basically just knitting what I see. So whatever stitches were in front of me on my needle, front and back, I would just knit them. And as you can see, here's my row where I did a cable. Now, on top of that cable, I've done 5 rows. So this cable is going to cross every 6 rows because I'm going to do another cable and show you that the effect that we get when we do multiple cables. Yeah, so let's just look at that now. So now I'm going to go over to those cables. And I'm going to do something really sneaky. I'm actually going to knit this cable without a cable needle. And it's the same thing as if I actually used my cable needle and did that. And I'm going to leave that for another time, for another segment where I show you how to do that without the cable needle. And some of you will pick it up from just watching this and seeing what I've done, but yeah, we will look at that at some point in time in the future. Or better yet, again, you can take a class, your local yarn shop, pretty much any of the knitting conventions that are out there. There will be somebody showing you how to do a cable without a cable needle. Or ask somebody in your knitting group. I'm sure one of them knows. Lord knows I've shown quite a few people how to do that in the group. And now I'm just going to do one more row just to show the cable a little bit better. And then we'll talk about the nomenclature of a cable, basically the notation. Okay, there we go. So that looks beautiful. I'm going to do one more row just because I like that. And I just love this yarn. I have to say I am a self-confessed bit of a yarn snob. I really like pure wool, and I find this Donegal is just incredible. This Donegal tweed, it comes in so many different colors. It's just amazing, amazing yarn. It's fantastic to knit with. Really, really nice to the touch. And now they have a Donegal soft as well, which is even softer. I mean, this is soft for me. This is a perfect sweater yarn. But they have one that's even softer for those people that like it much softer. But again, we'll look at that in a future segment of yarn review. So there you go. There's my cable. And if you could count it, well, I'll zoom in a bit. There's actually 6 rows in between each of those crossings. And that's how squat that is when I do it 6 rows. Now, depending on the thickness of your yarn and the needles that you're using and everything else, that 6 rows can be that, it can be this, it can be this. It all depends on lots of other factors that we're not looking at today. So there's your cable, and it's that simple to make a cable. Now, for the notation of the cable, a cable like this, the pattern would be fairly simple. It would be, okay, we're not going to include the solid stitches. It's going to say purl 2, knit 6, purl 2. That's going to be row 1. Row 3 will be, we'll say we cable on row 3. It would be purl 2. And now, unfortunately, the notation for cabling is not yet standardized. But there are people that are working towards trying to get a little more standardized and make it a little easier to understand. In the past, for your next 6 stitches, it would say something like C6F, which is cross 6 front. Now, or cable 6 front. Now the cable tells you that you're going to cable. 6 tells you how many stitches are involved. And then the F is front, which tells you that it's going to cross over the front, or it's going to cross to the right. Now, regardless of what notation they use, because another one might be 3/3 RC for right cross. But whatever the notation is in the pattern, there should be a glossary or a key that tells you exactly what it means. Well, actually not the key, a glossary that tells you exactly what it means and the exact instructions. And in this case, it would say something like, take the next 3 stitches and put the next 3 stitches on your cable needle and put it to the back. Knit the next 3 stitches from your left needle, then knit 3 stitches off your cable needle. Then purl 2, and that's the notation for this particular cable pattern. Now that cable row, we only do that every 6 rows. Okay, if we did that every right side row, like I said, you'd have this squished right down, and that wouldn't look very, very good. You could do it more, like, every 12 rows, and then you'd basically have a cable twice as long as that one, or every 18, or it all depends on the effect that you want. But that, in a nutshell, is how you make a cable. And as I've said a couple of times already, there is lots more to cables than just that. But that basic concept now enables you to go and play and to experiment, see what you can come up with cables. Wait, we are not done yet though. I did say that this was a 2-for-1. So we are looking at the second part of this. Now, in the beginning, I showed you how we basically just took the skein of yarn that we were using and we started knitting with it. So let's say we're done knitting for a while. Obviously, we're not done with the skein, and we're not done knitting, but the segment is now over, so I'm finished with that. What do I do with all this yarn? Well, as you can see, it's still in its shape, so all I'm going to do is put the knitting aside, take my skein of yarn, and twist it up again. Look at that. Put that in through there. And my work is on my needles, and my skein is still all nice and tidy. And I can then put that in my pocket and go for a walk and do whatever it is that I need to do until I come back to it. And then when I come back to it, I simply just open it back out, just like that. Find where I was working and continue on. How simple is that, and how cool is that, right? Okay, so there you go. You got a little bonus tip in today's segment of Knit You. Now, as I said earlier, there is so much more to cables than just crossing 3 stitches over 3 stitches, or 2 over 2, or 1 over 3, or whatever it happens to be. And if you're interested in delving into the world of cables, I've created a cable called the Barrington Braid, which is on the website, and there's a link to it in the description. And I've got an ebook that goes really into cables, and it's a big rabbit hole though, so be careful. The ebook the link for that is below, and if you use the code Hugzzz10, you'll get 10% off of that. I'd love to see the kind of stuff you come up with that. Okay, this is Mr. Hugzzz saying thank you so much for joining me again on Knit You, and I look forward to seeing you in a future episode where we're going to go into more things. As a matter of fact, why don't you tell me in the description the kind of things that you'd like to learn to do in Knit You. What do you want me to show you and teach you? Okay? All right, Mr. Hugzzz, I'll see you later. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Hugzzz. Now, be warned, that is just the tip of the iceberg, and the world of cables is a rabbit hole that goes on and on and on. As a matter of fact, I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't because of cables, because after I made my first sweater, the second sweater that I actually made was a heavily cabled sweater, and I saw somebody else making it and I had to make it myself. And yeah, I there's just no looking back. I think it's probably in my genes somewhere as well, because I've always loved the traditional Aran look of a nicely cabled sweater. Make sure you check the show notes for this episode, episode 11, on the website, ittakesballstoknit.com. I've put up some links to some people that I think that you might be interested in if you're interested in the world of cables. And yeah, as I said, be warned, it is a rabbit hole, a very, very deep one. So one of the best things about doing this show and bringing all this information about the knitting world to you is that I occasionally get a chance to meet some of my idols, or people that I have on my bucket list. And last summer, thanks to a good friend of mine, Julie DeBro, or Julie Knits in Paris, I got to meet Susan Crawford. I met her initially in the Lake District with Julie and her hubby. And yeah, I had a brief introduction to Susan and Gavin at that point. And then they invited me over to their place for the weekend. Their daughter Charlie was doing a supper club, and that is definitely worth checking out. But that's an entirely other topic, entirely different topic. So check for the link on that. I did a little video of Charlie and her supper club. It's such an amazing thing. That's in the description and also in the show notes on the website. And then I stayed overnight and got to experience life on a working farm at Susan Crawford Vintage. And I have to tell you, it was an experience unlike any other. It was just incredible. Here is, I think I said it in the video, this is basically just a little ecosystem, this farm. It's actually not a little ecosystem, it's a big ecosystem. They do everything there. It's amazing. They write and publish books. They produce yarn. They actually breed the sheep that produce the fleece, and then they get the yarns, the fleece spun into yarn. Susan has a very big hand in the dyeing, and she's actually going into natural dyeing as well. They then create patterns and designs and everything else, and it's all done right here on the farm. Needless to say, I could do multiple segments on Susan Crawford, and as a matter of fact, I am going to be doing a separate segment in the future on her books, because she's got, I think, 5 or 7, 5 now at least. And again, like I said, I could actually do a segment on each one of those, and you'll find out about that in the video. Make sure you watch it. But this time I'm giving you like an all-around tour of the farm. Some of the information is outdated. Not much. It's just about the events, the retreats that they do. That's something else. They do retreats. So again, make sure you check the show notes and check out their website, susancrawfordvintage.com. So come with me now, and I'm going to take you on a little tour of the farm, and you're going to see what life is like on a working farm. So I am lucky enough to be in the room with Susan Crawford, and Susan is a knitter of renown. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to tell you anything about her. I'm going to have her tell you everything about her, because there's quite a bit and I missed some of it. So first of all, Susan, thank you for allowing us to do this. It's just, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here. You were on my bucket list of people to get on this show. And I'm hoping that all the millions of viewers that are watching this are going to appreciate the stuff that they're going to learn about you. So, you know, how about, okay, so we know your name, Susan Crawford Vintage. How about telling us what you're about? What is Susan Crawford Vintage?
Well, Susan Crawford Vintage is my brand, really. I write books, I design patterns, I have yarn ranges, I teach, I lecture, I do research about historical knitting, I run a farm, I have sheep, and occasionally I go to sleep at night, but not very often.
Right.
But yeah, we live in a lovely part of North Lancashire in the UK, where several years ago we moved to a small hill farm, where we now also have a shop in the last few weeks that we opened for the summer, where we're sat now. And here we also have our sheep, and we're starting to have classes, and we also work on a lot of the physical processes of producing our own yarns using British wool.
Wow. And you do workshops as well, and a retreat.
Yes, we do. We run retreats and we do workshops there as well. Yeah.
I could stay here and just shoot segment after segment after segment about you. You know that, because you fit into so many different categories of information that I'm trying to get out to everybody. So that's fantastic. Love this shop. This is amazing. And you say this is just a few weeks in.
Yes. Yeah. We opened for the first time. We did some trial runs earlier in the year, but we opened officially for the first time in July, and we had a grand opening weekend. But it's been a goal for, since the 5 years that we've lived here. The target was to have our own little space where we could sell our wares and people could come and see what we were doing here at the farm. Mm-hmm.
And you have your online presence as well.
Yes, our main, I should have said that really. Our main access point to the world is our online shop, which is susancrawfordvintage.com. Right. And we've been running that for quite a number of years now. So all our products and books and things all go on there.
Right. You do a lot of things here, a lot of things. And one of them is you've written some books, I understand.
Yes.
Okay. Can you just tell us those titles?
Certainly,
or
yeah.
Those really quickly?
Well, since 2008, I have written 5 books. The first one was Stitch in Time Volume 1, which looked at knitting patterns from the 1920s to the end of the 1940s. I followed that with a second volume, which moved the period slightly and looks at fashion from the 1930s to the end of the 1950s. And between them there is 140 patterns split over the 2 books that have all been multi-sized, recreated and photographed and updated so that anybody can knit one of these beautiful pieces. after those, I decided to do a couple of small books because I think 300-page books should only be done every so often. And I just did 2 sort of small design projects, one called Vintage Gifts to Knit and the other called Coronation Knits, which looked at fashion around the 1953 coronation of Queen Elizabeth, and looking at how she was actually a fashion icon herself at the time. Wow. And people like my mum, she was hugely influential. So, so did those 2. And at the same time and after, I was working on the Vintage Shetland project, which is the sort of the largest research project that I've ever embarked on. And that looked at 27 pieces from the Shetland Museum archive. We recreated them, wrote patterns for them, and then also told their stories, and the stories of the people who wore them, or the people who knitted them, or the part of fashion history or social history that they inhabited. And that's where I'm up to in terms of books at the moment.
Wow. You spent time, a lot of time, writing some books, and on top of that you found time to, get a farm, and you have your own yarn line.
Yes, I do, yes.
Okay, so I guess the yarn came before the books because you used the yarn in the books, or at the same time? Or?
Well, actually what happened when we published volume 1, believe it or not, it was actually really, really hard to get fingering weight yarns. Right. Certainly in the UK, it was something that had faded out of popularity. Okay. So there was very, very few yarns available. And of course, because they're vintage pieces, nearly all of them were in 4-ply yarn. So it was quite problematic to get enough yarns and enough colours and enough variety to actually put the book together. So before we started on volume 2, that was when we started working on our first yarn ranges, which are our Excelana yarn, which this is the fingering weight, which is one of our best selling yarns. It's 100% British wool, and it is a blend of what is called the Exmoor mule and 30% Blueface Leicester. So it's a really soft but
sturdy,
still a woolly yarn. And because it's still a woolly yarn, it's got a certain stickiness that is absolutely perfect for colour work. The colours really, really hold together and give you a beautiful sort of smooth surface with colour work. But it's also really good for textural work and just straightforward stocking stitch. And also really good for cables, by the way.
Oh, yay!
For someone who likes cables. So we started just with 8 colours of the 4-ply, which is what we call it in the UK, just to be awkward. It's actually only got 3 plies, but it's still 4-ply.
That makes it perfect for cables, actually.
It does. So yes, we started with 8 colours, and now I have 24 in the 4-ply. Choosing the colours is one of my favourite things of my entire job, is choosing what colours I'm going to get and which ones work with which and what do I need and how can I add yet another colour to the collection. I just love it. So all of these are commercially dyed by a wonderful dyer who's just over in the borders of Scotland, who I work very closely with. Once we had the 4-ply, we also then launched our double knit, which again is worsted in. It's slightly lighter than worsted.
We have one called DK.
You do have DK.
Yeah, it's about 22 stitches over 4 inches.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So this is exactly the same blend as the 4-ply, but these come in nice, juicy 100 gram skeins, and has a completely different colour palette that I'm currently building up at the moment. So we've got 10 colours in the DK. This one has been used to make the Constant Companion cardigan, which you can see just behind me.
Yes.
That's been extremely popular, and yeah, people are really enjoying using the new DK. So I really like that one. But then what we also had to do when we were making the Vintage Shetland project was source a very original weight of yarn, because most of the pieces we found were actually finer than fingering weight. Sorry, you might be able to hear the sheep shouting outside at the moment. They're all playing outside. I can see them over.
That's great background music.
Yeah. So they are finer than fingering weight, but they are heavier than 2-ply lace weight.
Right.
So it sort of sits right in the middle. And it's what I like to call the equivalent of a vintage 3-ply.
Right.
And the vintage 3-ply was something that was really, really popular during the 1930s through to the early 1960s. And it allows more detail, because you can get about, you can get up to about 34 stitches.
Wow.
To the 4 inches if you really want to. But yeah, so that became for this Fenella, which is, in fact, I'm covering up the name, but this is Fenella. So again, it's 100% British wool, and it's in a very similar blend to the other two, mainly because I know how good this is for colour work, and colour work was the main reason why we needed this yarn. All the colours in Fenella were taken directly from the colours of the garments in the museum. So they are true vintage colours as well. That was really challenging, because if you can imagine, the garments are in the museum.
Yes. So
the dyer is elsewhere.
Right.
So I was having to try and get little samples that would be able to show the colours. From the dyer's point of view, a photograph is of no use. He needs textile.
Specific,
It can't be shiny, because it reflects the light differently, and therefore the colour would come out differently. So I had to spend a lot of time trying to get samples that matched. And then once I'd got them, I had to wait till next time I'd go up to Shetland, check that I'd got that right. Then it could go off to the dyer. So it took a long time just to develop the colour palette, to be honest with you. But we ended up eventually with, I've now got 28 colours of Fenella. And I would like more, because every time you get another colour, you just think, but if there was, if we could just have a purple or a red or a pink that just fitted. So once you go down the slippery slope of
it's the rabbit hole.
Having colours, you just keep coming up with more. So they are what I think of as our core yarns that we have all the time and just keep developing and building. I then have some more specific yarns that are to do with being here on the farm and the sheep that we keep. And the first one of those we developed was a yarn called Ghyll. It's called Ghyll because we live on a farm called Monkley Ghyll. Ghyll actually means ravine in Old Norse, which is basically a cut between the ground with water running through it, and the ravine is the bit that the water is cut. But it's Ghyll is just an old word that's still used here in the north of England to mean that, and it seemed a fitting name. But I'd started keeping a local sheep which is called the Lonk, which is very, very unique to North Lancashire and just across the Pennines, which are the hills over to the right that you can see from the farm. And it's a hill breed, and therefore it's a very, very hardy, strong sheep that can live up on the mountainside for 12 months of the year, need very little human interaction, can survive blizzards, fighting cold winds, enormous amounts of rain and show very ill effect for it. So I wanted to be able to use that yarn as well and demonstrate that it's a good yarn for knitting with. I found out that it was used very heavily in the hosiery industry in the UK up until the 1930s. And then it just completely, the lonk breed itself just sort of disappeared from use, really. It was still farmed by a small number of people, but it stayed very, very niche ever since. So basically what happened was in 2016 I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Some of your viewers might have been on that journey with me on Instagram and so on. But I wanted to do something positive during the time of having chemotherapy and surgery and all the other awful things that go with treatment. And I collected both our own fleeces from our lonks and also the lonk fleeces from a local farmer, and we collect them up from him and put them with ours to make our yarn. So this is Ghyll, which came as the result of that awful period, but then something really, really positive came out of it. So it's a 100% Lancashire lonk, and I think, as we discussed, it is really good for textural knits and would make really good gamzees, that type of thing. This was our first batch, and we are now almost out of this one, but we're working on getting our next batch done with the fleeces that we've currently got taking up huge amounts of space in the barn. And we had this also hand dyed in a small number of colours by some hand dyers who I was very much a fan of, for a project that we did to raise money for our local cancer care charity here in Lancaster, who had been hugely helpful for me going through treatment. So we created 4 colours and 2 shawl patterns, which are called the FUBC shawls. You could probably work out what those initials mean. And that helped us raise around £3,000 for the local cancer charity. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah, so it's gone all over the world, this yarn, which is wonderful, and is hopefully around the shoulders of a lot of people who have supported it for really, really good reasons. So Ghyll has got a special place in my heart, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
It gave me a lot of positive thought through a very dark time, and I knew that I had to still be there when the yarn came back. So it was sort of it left me no alternative but to get through it, because I needed to see the yarn when it got back.
That's excellent motivation. And congratulations on getting through it. I know some people don't, and it's wonderful that you did.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and then our latest yarn that we've just, we're in pre-sale mode at the moment, so officially it's not yet available in the world, but it's it sort of is, and this is Barn. As you can see, it's still just got its little tag on, but this is very, very special to me. It uses Jacobs, which is a primitive breed that probably everybody loves. Jacobs, they're so distinctive, but also white Shetland and black Shetland fleeces, which we have here at the farm, and it's just a really, really soft, squidgy, bouncy, and considering that it's all primitive hill breed sheep that have gone into it, it's just soft beyond what I could ever have anticipated when I arranged to have this done. So this one is launching in September, and at the moment that's sort of what I'm spending my time doing, is getting ready for this yarn coming out, creating new designs for it, and just looking forward to releasing my new my new child out into the world. But it's just everything and more that I could have wanted. The Jacobs has been blended with the white Shetland to make it really nice and soft, but still retaining that sort of hardiness. And then the black Shetland has been added as a single ply afterwards. So you can just, when you actually look closely at it, there's a single black thread running through it. So it just gives you that really, really great definition and depth. And certainly when it has any colours done with it, it will create that nice sort of heathery finish that everybody likes.
How many colours are you planning for this one?
I don't know yet. I think I'm going to start slow. I think we're going to have the grey and maybe 4 just to start with, and then I will then get carried away and add more. Yeah, but we're going to start with 4. Possibly I might look at hand dyeing these rather than commercially dyed.
Right.
But undecided on that as yet. I've been keeping dye plants here at the farm for some time, specifically.
So
for the
now
purpose.
you're going to get into dyeing.
Well, I've dyed. I do dye, as many of us do, but the natural dyeing is something that,
particularly
I'm keen to move into, but I've only sort of put my.
When is your cloning program?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I still think I'm 15 and I've got another 150 years of life left, but I'm going to do it. Yeah.
Nice. So, Susan, we're sitting in now the store, and as we said earlier, this is a recent addition, and just, I guess, part of the evolution of Susan Crawford Vintage. Can you tell us a little bit about it and how it came to be and everything?
Well, I think from the moment we first arrived at the farm, having a store here was a goal. The buildings were in a terrible state of disrepair, so it wasn't something that we could just magically start doing. So it's taken several years of renovation to get to the stage that we are now. And we wanted it to be more than just the yarn store. It is a yarn store, but it is also we have all our farm produce here, so everything that we grow you can also buy in the store. We have our jams and our preserves and our sourdough bread and cakes, and we have a little cafe here, and slowly we're building up sort of other gifts and things that are all either connected to the farm in some way, or support the ethos of what we're doing here. So it's a one-stop place to see everything that the farm is doing, really. At the moment we're not open every day because we're a farm, so there's a lot of other tasks to do. But we're slowly building that up, and doing more and more things here at the farm all the time, with events and things all connected to the store. So it's an exciting new venture, really.
Yeah, excellent. And, well, exciting new ventures, I guess it's not new, but you also you have retreats.
Yeah, we do. We only actually started that last year.
Okay, so it is a new venture.
It is a new venture, yeah. So we've done one retreat here at the farm that was sort of like a trial run type of thing. And then we've done 2 retreats up to now at a nearby venue, just up into the Lake District that's on the banks of Derwent Water, which is a beautiful lake. And we just lock ourselves away for 5 days, and I teach and I tell stories from the book and things like that. And we just all have a shared love for knitting, and my daughter is an amazing cook, and she does all the catering at the retreats, and a lot of it again is from the food that we grow here, and sort of brings the farm and knitting together. But yeah, we've got another retreat coming up in November, which I'm really, really looking forward to. So that's going to have a much more wintry theme to it.
Right.
And we've got a cruise on the lake planned and things like that. So it's a perfect opportunity to wear big woolly jumpers and scarves and hats.
Or knit some too.
Yeah, or knit some, yeah.
Or both.
Yeah.
So is information about that on your website?
It is, yeah.
It is?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then hopefully next year, touch wood, we will do our first proper farm-based retreat as well.
Right.
But at the moment, that's still
in the planning stage.
That's still in the planning stages. But yeah, but that's the ultimate goal. Yeah, is to be able to do a sort of 3 or 4 day retreat here at the farm as well.
So you seem to have a basic philosophy of tying everything together and bringing us back to self-sustainability rather than just being consumers going out and, you know, buying everything that we need. We're going back to a maker mentality. Is that about right? Or
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we even on a personal level within the farm, that's sort of the way that we approach a lot of the processes that we do. Everything, the yarn that we shear from our sheep, we have got to the stage now where we have 100% of it is used in one way or another.
Yeah, I saw you had compost.
Yeah.
From the yarn.
Yeah, we now basically there is a local company who makes compost from nothing more than wool and bracken, and bracken is a sort of densely growing fern that grows wild on the mountainsides in the north of England, and it's hugely problematic. It suppresses the grass. It actually contains a chemical that stops other fauna from growing. It's an incredibly clever plant, but it blanket covers entire areas. So this amazing company cut the bracken for the farmers, but then use the bracken to make compost, and they use waste fleece alongside it. So the bracken and the fleece are just put together, and the heat generated, it breaks down and becomes compost. So there's no electricity used or anything once it gets to that stage. It's just, so it's a very
good,
low impact and amazingly nutrient rich. We grow all our vegetables here in it. It's 100% organic, so it's, because we're an organic farm, it's really important that we know what goes into the mediums we're growing in. So we either use our good fleeces for yarn manufacture, we use it within our growing anyway to, if you ever have any fleece, it's amazing for stopping frost. It actually reduces the amount of water that you need to use when you're growing plants.
It acts kind of like peat, doesn't it? It retains water very, very well.
But you're not digging up peat, so it's a much more environmentally friendly. And so fleeces that aren't very good from our old sheep or whatever, we can put them in the bottom of our raised beds where we grow our vegetables, and it reduces the amount of water that we have to use. So it's brilliant. However, even with that, there are still other parts of fleece that just aren't, we can't really use. They're pretty poor. We have arranged with the company who make the compost that we now give them all our waste fleece, and that actually goes in to the compost that we use and that we sell here at the farm. So it's created a perfect cycle really of no waste and complete reusability. So we're really proud of that. So this
entire farm is like almost like an ecosystem, like a little self-contained ecosystem. Yeah,
that's what we're trying to get to, I think, really. Yeah. So one of the other things that we've done, Gavin, who we've mentioned several times before, is I suppose basically if you've watched Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
yes,
Gavin is my Caractacus Potts, for want of a better description. But he makes things that actually work.
Right.
And one of the things that happens, because I like to work closely with the dyer who creates our yarns, it comes back to us on cones. We could send it off to yet another factory to have more processes done, but because of the way we like to work, I like to get the yarn back at that stage, and we then have to wind it off to create skeins.
You skein it yourself. Right.
So we have 25 gram skeins of Fenella, 50 gram skeins of Excelana fingering weight, and 100 gram skeins of Excelana DK. So that already creates complexities.
Yes.
To use a niddy noddy would take
Forever.
just ridiculous amounts of time. So what Gavin did was actually build 2 hand-powered winding machines. So they don't use any external power, they're just all driven by the ability to turn a handle. So we have a small one that makes the 25 gram and 50 gram skeins, and a larger one that makes the 100 gram skeins. So the manufacturing process from that point on is all done in-house at the farm. He built a steam cabinet, so once the yarn comes off the cone and into skeins, it then basically is conditioned through steam. And then it goes downstairs into the room below here, where it is then twisted into skeins, and it is banded and packed up. So a significant part of the process is done here on the farm. We're very proud of that.
Wow, so that's fascinating, all the, just everything that goes on here. And on top of all that now, so I guess you've got the books. From the book you realized, okay, you have to get your own yarn. So, okay, you get your own yarn. And now I understand you got sheep to produce your own yarn.
Yes.
Tell us about that. What kind of sheep do you have?
Well, when we first moved in 2014, we didn't really have a huge amount of knowledge about sheep, to be honest with you. I knew I wanted sheep, but what breeds to get was all. I always wanted Shetlands, but beyond that, there was no real plan. But initially, we actually ended up with probably the complete opposite to a Shetland, which is the Zwarble, or the Zwartbles, which is a Dutch sheep and is as tall as a Shetland is small. And they are just a very, very friendly, easy to look after sort of sheep, which is why we started with those. So we started with just 6 Zwartbles, then the Shetland onslaught started, and I think we started with about 20 Shetlands of all different colours and patterns. We had some white Shetlands. We wanted to get as many varieties of Shetland sheep as we possibly could. So when we got our first small flock of 20, we got as many different of the patterns that you see in Shetland sheep as we could to start our flock off. So I don't know whether you know, but there are approximately 69 recognised variations of Shetland sheep.
I didn't know I was going to ask you that. So there's 69 of just Shetland?
Yes. And they are the sort of the recognised ones. There are actually other variations that crop up, which aren't sort of the recognised significant patterns. But there are things such as Cat Mogget and Blurget and Smerslet.
So when you say variations, are you talking like colorations on the sheep? Is that what?
Yeah, they are. They have patterns and they have spots. So a Shetland is white or black, and then with patterns and spots. So we wanted as many of the variation as we could possibly get, because to be honest, just white sheep on the field all the time just doesn't really do anything for me. We are in an area where there are many hundreds of commercial sheep, and that wasn't what we we're keeping the sheep for. So over the years we've started breeding to get as many of the colours as we and types as we possibly can, because it's just wonderful seeing all these different patterns running about on the field and all the different colour combinations that you can get. Some with just random spots on the back, others with like masks around their eyes, and it's just great. It's just a fascinating breed to have. They're also really easy to look after, and they are also they're really light on the ground, and we live in an area with quite a lot of erosion and soil loss, and it's one of the things that we are, as farmers, we're always thinking about. And so more small sheep that cause less impact on the ground is actually much better for the environment than a lot of big heavy ones. So, but saying that, we do have a small flock of lonks, which is our local breed, and they're quite something, the lonk. Both the men and the male and the females have horns, and really beautiful big proper curly horns. Nice. And they have patterned faces, black and white patterned faces, and then white bodies, and then really good sturdy legs for climbing mountains and wading through snow blizzards and so on. And they're quite similar in that respect to the Herdwick, which is the other sheep that we keep, which again, they are local to Cumbria, which is the county that we're right next to. And they are everybody's favourite sheep. They are the teddy bears of sheep. And we've got them just because they are so beautiful and they belong in this area. A while back there was an outbreak of a thing called foot and mouth disease, and it actually killed off a huge percentage of the gene pool of the Herdwick sheep. So there's a strong, not a formal programme, but there's certainly a
conscious effort.
An effort, to keep Herdwicks spreading, so that if anything like that ever happened again, they wouldn't all be concentrated in one place and lost completely. So, but they're really suited to our hilly ground and are quite windy and wet weather that we get out here. So that is basically the majority of our sheep, except we have one pure Icelandic.
Yes.
Who is our very, very special. Yeah.
Right. And you have 2 goats.
And we have 2 goats, 2 very badly behaved goats. Yes. Jake and Elwood.
Jake was a sweetheart earlier.
They are. That's just them trying to. Yeah. They are. They're lovely, but they are naughty as well. Normally, shortly after lambing, when they get introduced to the lambs, they just get the lambs into so much mischief. They are the trouble causers. They are the ones saying, "Let's go over this wall. Let's see what's round this corner." And the lambs, of course, just
follow along.
Oh, this looks fun. Yeah. So they are mischief makers, but they are really, really lovely. Yeah, and they are twin brothers. So nice. They are very, very close, and often the 2 of them don't like being separated. So even at shearing time, if one can't see the other, they will start crying, and we have to make sure that they're not out of each other's sight and things like that. Yeah, so they're really sweet.
Nice. Okay, Susan, so I know I've kind of got you wondering what's happening next, because I just mentioned that there's only one thing left, and it's actually a fun thing. Okay. I have a little game that I like to play with everybody. It's not really a game. It's a great way to get to know somebody in 10 questions or so, and it's called Either Or. And as it says, it's either or. So I'm going to give you 2 choices. Okay. And you can pick one or the other. You cannot pick both, or maybe, or yes, or things like that.
All right.
Okay, we're
Yeah.
clear on the rules?
Yep.
Okay, so let's start. Start with one that I think I know the answer. Color work or texture?
Colour work.
Color work. And another fairly easy one, I think. Fingering or worsted?
Ooh.
I thought that would have been automatic.
Yeah, fingering, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Shawls or jumpers?
Oh. Jumpers.
Okay.
Although. Yeah. No.
Rules.
Jumpers.
Okay,
Yeah.
jumpers. And yoked or raglan?
Yoked.
Yoked. Okay. Okay, let's get interesting now. Hot or cold?
Cold.
Oh, okay. Tea or coffee?
Tea. There is no discussion on that one.
Gin or whiskey?
Gin.
Gee, that was very, very quick. Beach or mountain?
Mountain.
Mountain, wow. Okay, everybody else is beach. And let's see, let me think of one. Okay, let's do one more. I was gonna go with, let's see. Shetland or Lock?
That's a really cruel question. They're all my babies. Shetland.
Okay. All right, and that's that. I want to thank you so much for just allowing me to be here and to visit with you, and your hospitality and everything. You were actually on my bucket list. It was so gratuitous that I got to meet you at this stage. I was planning to contact you later, but thank you so much for just allowing us into your little world, and we really look forward to seeing how this evolves and how this goes from here. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Wasn't that incredible? I had such a great time at Monkley Ghyll Farm for that weekend that I'm actually looking at going back and spending a week with Susan and Gavin and actually helping out on the farm. This is something that they do for travelers that want to experience what a working farm is really like, and they provide room and board, and the travelers provide the work. And I had so much fun. I can't imagine. It will be great. Gavin, what a mind. Oh man, and that skein winder that he has, I'm trying to get him to put that into mass production, because I know quite a few yarn dyers that would really like that. If you get a chance, I really urge you, check out Susan Crawford Vintage and her Instagram and her website, and there's just so much more. We will be revisiting them and looking at the books in a future episode of Knitlit. I promise you, it was just too much to put into all the one, because just the feature on the books alone could be, heck, it could be an entire episode of this show. Susan, thank you so much for having me for that weekend. It was such a treat meeting you and Gavin and all the sheep. They were fun. Okay, now we're going to go and talk with Kate and Joe. And Kate is the editor of Knit Now magazine, and Joe's the editor of your Knit and Crochet Now magazine. And between the two of them, they put out 24 issues a year. There's 14 of Knit Now and 10 of Knit and Crochet Now. And they also help out with Crochet Now magazine, which is another 14 titles. So that's what, 38. That's 38 titles that go out every year. So I think these ladies know what they're talking about when they're telling us what goes into putting a magazine together. Why don't we go and have a chat with them and find out exactly what that is. Hello everybody, I am here. I'm actually really lucky to be in the studio with these two lovely young ladies, and I'll have them introduce themselves to you.
Hi, my name's Kate. I'm the editor of Knit Now magazine.
And I'm Joanna. I'm the editor of Your Crochet and Knitting magazine.
Excellent. And where are we exactly? Geographically.
We are in sunny Stockport, which is just south of Manchester in the northwest of England.
People are out there and they're trying to think, okay, so I get this magazine at the store. What we'd like to do here is show them the process or give them an idea of what happens in creating that magazine. Mm-hmm. First of all, how many magazines do you put out a year?
Well, Knit Now, we do 14 issues a year, and that's the same for our sister publication Crochet Now, which is edited by Jenny, who's back at the office right now. Joe's magazine.
Yeah, we have slightly fewer. We have 10 issues a year.
Okay. Now, even at slightly fewer at 10 and 14, that's a lot of magazines going out, because most publications do a quarterly.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, a lot of that is dictated by what the newsstand wants, and here most magazines are sold actually in supermarkets rather than in newsagents or bookstores. So supermarkets want that fast turnover. They want new all the time. So they really do push for a lot of issues in a year. But that means, we're always coming out with new ideas and, fresh projects. And if you don't fancy one issue, there'll be another one along not too
Don't
much
have
later.
to wait too long for the next one. Yeah, that's true. And it keeps us busy, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It keeps
I was
us out
going to
of
say, I
trouble.
imagine there's a lot more work for the two of you.
Yeah, but it is fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're always looking at new designs and new yarns and
yeah,
it's just always inspiration going on. So that's cool, isn't it?
And it's not just us, obviously. Pretty much all of the design is done by freelance designers. We do a couple of bits here and there
We do.
ourselves.
Oh, you guys actually put some designs for
Yeah, we
the-
can't resist, can we?
No, sometimes there's a gap to fill and you get the idea in your head of what you want it to be, and you're like, well, I'll just do that myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if a yarn comes in and you're like, I really want to knit with that myself.
Yeah, I want to
send
keep
out
that
to
for me.
designer.
So yeah, I'll do a design on that. Yeah, we do that now and again. That's fun.
Okay, so there's a million things I want to ask, but I'll try and just ask what I think are the critical things. First of all, you're talking about designs and freelance designers. If somebody wanted to submit a design to you, what's the process that they go through?
Well, it was fairly similar, isn't it? We decide on a theme for the issue usually, and we put a call out for submissions so people can just put in their ideas on that theme, and then we kind of work through, don't we, and decide what will work. We then liaise with the designer and make any tweaks, decide on what yarns we're going to use. But then the other part of that as well, we kind of look out for people, don't we? Anybody that might be people might be talking about a little bit more, or whose designs really grab us, really excite us, and we might contact people directly too to see if they'll work with us.
Yeah, so we have like a completely open call for submissions every issue. We've got a mailing list for that, which anyone can add themselves to. I can give you the link for that if you want to add that in. So it's really important for me particularly that there isn't some wall built up between me and designers, that I want people to always feel that they can come to me. We've been a lot of people's first place that they've been published, because, like I say, I don't necessarily expect someone to come with a massive portfolio of published designs, because not everyone can get to there on their own. They might not have the photography resources to self-publish, they might not have the money they need to pay a tech editor, things like that. So I really want to for our magazines to be a place where people can get their first foot into design.
Yes. And so if the design's good, the idea's good, that's a good starting point for us, isn't it? It's not that somebody has to have had 100 designs behind them. It's a chance for people to do something new, and we've found new designers that way. And we have some designers that we work with regularly, but it's really important to us, isn't it, to keep bringing in new talent and expose our readers to new designers. So it's a constant fun seeking out for a process.
And we also, with designers in mind, we only keep the rights to a pattern for 4 months. So the pattern will be in the magazine, but then that designer will get their rights back if they want to self-publish later on as well, and they can use our tech-edited version of the pattern and everything like that. Because for me, it's a real collaboration with my designers. I wouldn't have a magazine if it wasn't for them.
Exactly.
Okay, so that takes care of the designs that you put in there, but obviously your magazine isn't just a bunch of patterns.
No.
There's all kinds of other things in there.
All kinds of other stuff.
So you want to tell us a little bit about that? What else is in the magazines?
Something that particularly anyone over the pond might not be particularly familiar with is that British magazines come with what we call cover mounts. So that's stuff on the front of the magazine. I think, again, that's driven by the fact that we are a supermarket product, so we have to sit on the shelf and shout louder than everyone else that we've got more stuff going on. So this is the one that's just landed in the office. This is Knit Now, which is my magazine. So on the front there's a knitting kit to make Shaun the Sheep, which is an Aardman character. So we work with Aardman, who do the Shaun the Sheep movies and Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run and all those. So that's a lot of fun. But that's basically the first thing that you have to plan, because that has to be designed and manufactured and shipped and all of that. So we're planning
okayed by the license holders. So that's something we have to think about long in advance. Absolutely.
So that we plan cover mounts about a year in advance, and then we start planning design about 9 months before the magazine goes on sale. So sometimes that cover mount can lead on to what the designs will be in the magazine. So if we've got, say, a set of chunky crochet hooks on a magazine, then we know we need part of that magazine to include patterns that use those chunky crochet hooks.
And for my magazine, which is comes with a yarn kit, that licensed character can dictate the palette of that yarn kit, which then dictates the kind of projects that I commission. So it has a really big impact, doesn't it? Across all the magazines.
And it does make cynically, it does make a huge difference to our sales as well. Something I get asked about a lot is, wouldn't it be cheaper? Wouldn't it be easier? We could flick through the magazine if it didn't have this cover mount, if it didn't come in a bag. But speaking from a commercial point of view, we know that with a cover mount, we can sell 3-4 times as many copies as without. So I think it's that thing of, your logical brain says, no, I don't need this sort of extra stuff on the front, but when you see it in a shop, you get all excited.
People love the kind of, it's a package, it's a gift, there's lots of bits in there that you can enjoy, and we enjoy putting it together as well, so it works out well for everyone.
So it's not just yarn kits, we can do tools, we can get a little bit creative with, can we design a tool that we wish existed in knitting or crochet? We want, our own stitch counter that works exactly the way we want it to work, or whatever it is. So we get to do a little bit of product design in there too, which is always fun.
I've picked up quite a few of these magazines simply because of the packaging.
It does work.
So your marketing works.
And there's features as well, things that we want to write about and talk about that aren't necessarily just, here is how to make this thing, but it could be looking into the history of wool production in the UK, or interviewing a really interesting designer or a yarn company, having a little bit of a sneak peek behind the scenes, which we're really lucky to get as editors working in the yarn industry every day, is we meet so many amazing people, and getting to introduce those people to our readers is always exciting.
It is. It's a nice bridge, isn't it, between readers and kind of people who are lurking in the background. And like for my magazine as well, we have a lot of kind of how-to things because it's aimed slightly more at the beginner end. So we might have step-by-steps, or we might have a feature on how to work out a colour palette for your designs. So we try and cover everything that way.
And so trying to be responsive to what readers are asking for us as well. So many of our feature ideas, and particularly our technique guides and things, come from readers contacting us and saying, you know what, every pattern at the end you say weave in your ends and block. I don't know how to do either of those things, or I don't know if I'm doing it right. Tell me how to do it, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think being able to be responsive to readers is really important. We do spend a lot of time talking to readers, researching things, finding out what people want, what sizes they're knitting their garments in, because a couple of years ago in Knit Now we expanded our size range, because we've always gone up to a UK 26, which is I think a 3X in the US, sorry, but we expanded that up to, like, through the full size up to a 5X, which is around a UK 34 a couple of years ago. That was based on reader feedback. One of the other things people asked for was they wanted to see different models wearing things, and also for people to be standing and sitting wearing garments. So we've started trying to show both of those where we can. And we also have written instructions and charts for patterns. So you can choose which one you want to go for.
Now, something that you've touched on earlier, and now just saying that there with the reader feedback, I don't think people realize how long it takes to put an issue together. Like, they think they can make a comment or something, and then in the very next issue it's going to change. But can you just speak to that a second, for just in detail a little bit more? Because you said, basically it takes a year. Is that correct? Somewhere in that area?
Yeah, it can do, can't it? Like Kate said, we think about the cover mount, but then we have to commission the designers. We have to give them time to make or design the pattern. Then that has to come in, it has to be photographed, it has to be checked by tech editors, it has to be laid out. It's not only that, we're doing multiple issues at the same time. So one issue we might start planning in February, next one's a month after, but that's all running concurrently all the time. So it's not just one at one side, is it?
Yeah.
It's a lot of thinking about.
Yeah, so in terms of changing things, or like, for example, the sizing, that was something that probably took from, it was one reader that kept asking for it, and it was like, actually, I should be listening to this one person. So I did, and then I had to check with my designers and my tech editors that it would be feasible. I had to consider if we needed to allow extra space for the patterns, things like that. So I had to run through all of the logistics of how I could do it. And then once I'd made the decision, then it was from the next issue that I commissioned that the sizing requirements changed. But we're commissioning so far in advance that it was probably, I would say, 8 or 9 months from that initial inquiry from the reader that it changed in the magazine.
Right.
Because it takes that long to work out, right, how can we do this? Right, we're going to do this now. But then it has to work its way all the way through the system.
So there's no magic wand or just snap your fingers and something change. Okay.
Sadly not.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting to know, and especially nowadays with, obviously with the climate of inclusivity going
absolutely.
on, that people realize that changes are happening, but they don't happen overnight. That's fantastic.
Yeah, completely.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the crochet side of everything. How do you find it working right beside a knitting magazine? Do you collaborate?
Well, we do because
work together?
we do because you're crochet and knitting, and the knitting tends to be again more beginner end than knit now, but we kind of put each other in touch with designers we think will work for each other's, or if somebody say sends a submission to me for a magazine and I think it's probably better suited to crochet now, we kind of collaborate in that way, don't we?
Yeah.
But you've seen our office, we have yarn coming in all the time, we're always throwing it over the desk and squishing it and getting excited about each other's projects when they come through the post. So it's a real, we don't work in isolation, do we? At
No,
all?
and I think we've been trying more and more over sort of recent years to try and work much closer together, and you know, I couldn't possibly ask for a better team. Like, these guys they just make every day coming into work a joy.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun.
You know that, you know, if something goes wrong, someone's always got your back. If your work's piling up, you can ask someone to help. And as well, because we've all sort of worked across multiple magazines, like Jenny, who's the editor of Crochet Now, used to be my deputy editor on Knit Now. So if my workload's piling up, she'll put her hand up and say, do you want me to check those pages for you? And like likewise, if something goes wrong with one of her cover mounts, I mean, I'm associate publisher in the team anyway, so I'm sort of manager over these guys, but if something goes wrong, I always want to try and help out wherever I can.
Yeah, we definitely have that kind of element. I suppose the real fun comes in when we start, sharing designers and we do photo shoots for each other, which can be fun too. Or Jenny might say, you know, who can I get to crochet me a giant Elmo or whatever. And, oh, why don't you try such and such a person? So that's really fun.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of the team, how many people are involved in the production of this magazine? Not talking the printing and distribution, because that's a whole other side that's, you know, whatever. But generally, like in the office, I saw a lot of bodies.
There's a lot of bodies,
and
but
there's a lot of magazines.
working specifically on a magazine, you've got the editor, and the editor is usually just on that magazine. Because Joe's magazine isn't as frequent, you also do other things.
Yeah, I wear many hats.
Yes. Yeah. But on a normal 14 issue magazine like Knit Now or Crochet Now, there's usually an editor and then either a deputy editor or an editorial assistant who works across multiple magazines. So Liam, who is deputy editor on the yarn titles, works across Knit Now, Crochet Now and YCK. We've also got a team of sub-editors who do all the proofreading. So every page goes through, at least it goes through two of them. We also have our tech editors who work remotely. They're not full-time, but they do pattern check of every design.
Goes through them too.
So if you're talking about patterns, they get written by the designer and then they get checked by one tech editor and then another tech editor, and then they go through the editor or the deputy editor.
Wow.
And then one sub-editor, then they get laid out, and then they go back out to the tech editors and the designer to check, and the editor checks it again, and it goes back to the first sub-editor to incorporate any amends, and then it goes to a second sub-editor to check that the first sub-editor hasn't missed anything, and then it gets finalled and sent to print, and it gets checked on screen as well by the editor before it goes to print.
Yeah.
So I feel like we do everything humanly possible to catch any mistakes, but we are still human and they do still get through. It's always absolutely gutting when something gets past you and you're like, how did that happen?
I know, I hate that. But yeah, so it's not like there's not a lot of people in the chain, it's just the people are there, do a lot of steps.
Yeah. And then there's our designer as well who lays out the pages, and designers generally work on 2 magazines at a time. So.
And the photographer.
Photographers, yeah. Yeah, so that's the editorial side of things, looking at the words, but then there's the visual side as well.
So when all the patterns are okay, all the features are okay, they then go to the design team. We also then have the photographer who does all the shoots with the models or the home shoots, and yeah, they'll lay that all out for us and make it all look gorgeous.
Really couldn't do it without them.
Yeah, it's true. It has to look pretty, or else nobody would want to pick it up, would they?
I think is there anyone else that works? I mean, there's our sales team, I guess, who sell the adverts. And pretty much all the adverts in our magazines are specific to the craft, so hopefully it's something that's relevant to readers. Because obviously it helps pay the bills, it keeps the cover price down for you if there's some adverts in there.
But when I speak to people about what we do, I think people are always surprised to find out how few people are behind a magazine. So there's maybe about 7 people, including designers and advertisers and advertising and everything. There's 7 people working on a magazine. I think. But
most of them are working on multiple magazines. So it's not that you've got 7 people full time. You've probably got about the equivalent of 2 people full time.
Yeah. That's true, which people are always like, oh.
Yeah. And people hear, oh, you're an editor, you must have loads of minions. No.
There are no minions. There are no minions.
And when I was in the office, I saw all kinds of books. I saw yarns, I saw knitted and crocheted samples and things. So that all gets sent in to you guys and you have to deal with that?
Yeah, it's fun and overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, it's both of those things at the same time. So we do not have enough story.
We never have enough room for all the yarn, but we can never bring ourselves to let it go either. So we just end up in a kind of yarn fortress. So that's fun. But yeah, I think one of the best times of the issue for me is when you've commissioned all your projects and they start arriving through the post.
Yeah.
That day when you get 6 parcels and you're unwrapping
like
all these amazing.
That I got to open today.
Exactly. You've got to open one.
Share some of the joy.
That is really like a Christmas Day feeling, isn't it? To actually see them for real and see what someone's done with the yarn that you've given them is just. I just find that really exciting still.
Yeah. That's one of the best bits, definitely. And also, so we work with a lot of the big yarn companies in the UK, and getting to see them usually twice a year when they bring out their new collections, and you sit there and it's like, this is our new cotton chainette, or this is our new chunky alpaca, and you're like, whew. But then your brain starts working. It's like, oh, how can I use this? Like, what can I commission in this? Which colours are going to work for photography and all of that kind of stuff. And then it all goes in the cupboard, and you just occasionally have to open the cupboard and breathe in the yarn fumes when you're having a stressful day.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes you have to just throw yourself on the yarn.
Okay, so wow. Like, wow. And I can't even tell you how overwhelmed I was when I walked in and saw all those people going through. Like, I imagined there would be a few people and everything, but it was it was incredible. So the company that you actually work for, you guys have a bunch of magazines. It's not just these 3, right?
Yeah, so we work for Practical Publishing, which I think we've got, is it 11 regular titles now, something like that. The latest one is simply Lettering Magazine. That was launched a couple of months ago. Very, very lovely. So the editorial team is sort of split in 2. We're on the soft craft side, which is anything squishy. So that's anything to do with yarn and fabric. So we've got Knit Now, Crochet Now, Your Crochet and Knitting, Love Sewing and Quilt Now. And then over on the paper craft side, they do anything to do with card making, the Lettering Magazine, so they do die cutting, stamping, all of those kinds of things that I can't pretend to understand.
No, we don't really do it.
If it's got
They're all
hard
about
edges, I
yarn.
don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, just the fiber arts is a massive
Yeah,
one.
fiber
Yeah.
arts.
To then
Yeah.
include the paper. would
Yeah.
be crazy.
And then there's another arm of the business as well. On the papercraft side there's a papercraft e-commerce website called Craftstash. So that's a whole chunk of people as well in the office. But yeah, what they do is amazing, and I'm always in awe of them. But I don't quite understand it. I don't know how it works.
Right.
Cutting out tiny things and sticking them on other things, and I don't know.
It's just another world.
It's a different world. It is a different world, isn't it? Yeah.
Now, how hard is your magazine available online? Because okay, so how do you deal with I forget what the term you used for
The cover mounts.
The cover mounts with the online publication. It's just a different price and they don't get the cover mount, or?
I think it's the same price. What your crochet knitting isn't digital, is it?
No,
No.
don't have a digital copy. No.
No. But to be honest, particularly with Knit Now and Crochet Now, they're the same price online. But you're getting so many patterns that it is still worth it. People do still
Absolutely.
pay that price for the convenience. Particularly, it tends to be for people who are overseas, where the shipping would make it really expensive for them to get the whole thing in the post. Although we do post worldwide, but if what you actually want is that you've seen one specific pattern on Instagram or Ravelry or wherever, and the designer hasn't released it themselves yet, then it's usually worth it for one or two patterns. I always try and make sure so the cover price is usually on Knit Now it's $6.99, on Crochet Now it's usually $5.99. So we always
That's the cost of a single pattern on Ravelry.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was gonna say, so to get kind of 20 plus patterns.
Yeah. So
I think it's worth it, don't you?
I always try and make sure that whatever your taste, whatever your skill levels, all of that kind of thing, if you find at least two patterns in Knit Now that you like and would pay for individually, then you've got your value. So if you're a garment knitter and you've seen a couple of garments in that issue that you want, then you've got your value and everything else is a bonus. So if you don't knit for babies or whatever else that's in that issue, that you've still got your value out of those two patterns. So we try and deliberately, I think, keep the magazines quite broad, as broad as possible in appeal. So we're not excluding anyone based on, it's not all super expensive yarns. It's not all really, really tricky techniques, so that there's something for whatever your price point is, whatever your level, whatever your taste, whether you've got kids or not. Because I think knitting is a broad church, and it should be, and we should try and include as many people as possible rather than being cliquey and exclusive. That's not my bag. I want everyone to feel welcome. I don't want to be like, oh no, this is all really expensive yarn and there's nothing here for you, or things like that.
I did like your clicking needle gesture.
That was
nice.
entirely subconscious.
What's the distribution of the magazine like?
So for Knit Now, we put out about 25,000 copies per issue. For YCK, it's about 18,000. Most of that is in the UK, although we do ship worldwide and we do send some out to stores, mostly in the US and Canada. Your Crochet Knitting has only just started going over to the US and Canada, and to Australia as well. We send a good bunch to Australia. There's a few territories that we occasionally try elsewhere in the world, but the majority of it is US, Canada and Australia.
Okay. And then I guess people can get subscriptions online.
Yeah, you can subscribe pretty much wherever you are in the world. You can also buy individual back issues from our magazine shop, which is moremags.com. You can get them digitally. You can get Knit Now and Crochet Now digitally. You can't get YCK through Pocket Mags, which is either through a browser or through an app. So pretty much wherever you are in the world, you can get it somehow. It just Depends what works best for you, really, whether you want physical or digital, whether you want to go into a shop or order it online.
Nice. Okay, ladies, well, thank you so much for this very, very interesting look into the whole world of putting together the magazines, like the knitting and the crochet. And I can't even tell you, I mean, I knew there was stuff to it, but I just didn't realize how much. And obviously, both of you love your jobs, right?
Yeah. Well, being able to work on a magazine about something you genuinely love is it's a luxury, really, isn't it? We get a lot of joy from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're lucky.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you, and I look forward to checking these out. I'm gonna have to get subscriptions now.
And actually, you do.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening.
Can you believe that those two put out 38 issues? Well, actually, not just the two of them, but that team puts out 38 magazines a year. That's incredible. Most of publications, they do 4, and that's a lot. But these guys, 38. Joe, Kate, thank you so much for the tour. I can't wait to come back and chat with you guys again. And hopefully get you guys to both do a Knit You segment. That's right, you might have recognized Joe as having done the crochet segment in Knit You a few episodes back. Well, hopefully in the future, we'll get them both to do one. Yay. And that's not all the news from Joe and Kathy. They are going to give away a current issue of each of the magazines. So that means we're going to get 3 winners. And what you have to do for that is obviously make sure that you're following those publications on Instagram. Make sure that you're following me and that you subscribe to this channel. And leave a comment below and let me know what your favorite publication is of those 3 and why. And since we're on the subject of giveaways, we'd like to announce the winners of Trudy Ann's giveaway from a couple episodes ago. Now, Jan Prater, you are going to get the cookbook and the spices that Trudy Ann was giving away. I'll be in contact with you very, very shortly. And Kathy, you are going to get the tea of your choice, or the chai of your choice. I personally, for me, there's no choice. There's no question whatsoever. I would definitely recommend the masala chai. It is just divine. But of course, it's your prize, so you get to choose whichever one you'd like from the selection on her website. Okay? Thank you so much for following, for your comments. And Trudy Ann, thank you so much for your generosity. Well, that's the ending of another episode. This one, episode 11 of It Takes Balls to Knit the Show. Again, what can I say? Thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me. I hope you had a blast. I know I did. And I'm looking forward to putting out the next episode within the next 2 weeks on this channel. To make sure that you're informed when it comes out, click on the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That way you'll get an email as soon as I upload that next video, which will be within the next 2 weeks. Again, thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me, and I will see you in 2 weeks.